Session Blood.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Session Blood, episode 11. And today we are going to go through some of the matchups in the format. We feel like it's a good time with Road to Nationals opening up in other areas. I know there was one in Malaysia recently, and of course, New Zealand Nationals starting up soon. But first, as always, we love doing our shout-outs, and Carol, I know you had a couple you wanted to do today.
Yeah, so for me, it's, looking at Flesh and Blood, it's such an amazing game, and the reason why it's so good is because of the design. The design is flawless, all the classes are balanced so well. I just wanted to give a shout out to James White, Jason Chung, and Chris Gehring for, just being so precise at making not only the design amazing, but linking it so well with the backstories, the lore, and all that. And yeah, if you need any more members for your team, give me a holler.
This is a podcast or a job interview. Who knows? But yeah, no, I think...
Nah, but it's just like that's what caught my attention at first with this game. Is just the gameplay is so spot on.
Yeah, and I think that's a great shout out as well, because not only is it a great game, but their mission to bring people together to play great games. I know you and I and a lot of our friends used to play a lot of Magic back in the day, and we kept in touch through that. And we had sort of started playing occasionally, but not very much. And then Flesh and Blood came on the scene, and we're back. We're back, baby.
Yeah. Fun fact, trading card games is how I learned English coming into this country. So making lifelong friends, that's what it's all about.
Nasario, what?
Did you have any shout-outs, Kieran?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout-out, first of all, to the winner of the first Malaysian Road to Nationals. Actually, speaking to him briefly, unfortunately I had to go to sleep, but I wanted to have a talk to him about the Metagame over there sometime, so maybe we'll bring that in next week. But big shout out to Dirk Lee for taking it out on Dash Control. And that's actually a deck that we were given some sort of pretty short thrift, saying it's, it might be a bit of a dinosaur past its time, but he's certainly proved us wrong, so congratulations there. And just one other one, I always like to see new content creators in the game. I think it's great to help build up the ecosystem. And I know there's a new group called the Fab Five, based out of Europe, I believe. But yeah, it's really cool to see the scene sort of growing over there. So big shout out to all of you too.
I can't wait to see more, games, content coming up from Europe.
Yeah, I can't wait for sort of some of the, Road to Nationals over in some of the European countries, United States. It's going to be great. And
absolutely.
Actually, last but not least, I wanted to give a big shout out to one of our close friends, the one and only Tom Penny, an amazing Warrior player. And yeah, maybe we'll have to get him on the show sometime.
Hey, wait, who's it?
We made it.
Oh, wait, what?
Tom Penny's here.
Must have forgot.
Boom, boom, boom.
How's it going, guys? Nice to be here.
Yeah, good to have you, Tom. And just wanted to let everybody know that that's how me and Kieran actually got into the game. Tom was insistent that we tried to play Flesh and Blood. We were very kind of dismissive at first, being like, oh yeah, another trading card game, blah, blah, blah. But you convinced us. You got us into the game.
Yeah, I mean, once you guys gave it a go, I think it wasn't too hard to get you hooked on it. Obviously, it's a great game. Pretty obviously from the start, we were really enjoying it. But yeah, good on you guys for trusting me, having a bit of faith and giving it a go. It certainly worked out.
Yeah, definitely, because Tom was definitely a sort of persistent voice telling us to give it a go. And I still remember seeing the first game and seeing like this equipment starting on play, and I was like, what is this nonsense? And then I think I won my very first Seal deck game against Tom with a Goliath Gauntlets, and I threw out some massive Sorgasm Crush Attack for like 15 on turn one. I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like, I'm
this
pretty
game's
good.
Easy.
Interesting. I can't remember that, but yeah, I was probably an easier sell. I just saw, the game on Facebook. I think Amol Singh, he had a post about what cards he cracked in a sealed. This was, not long after Wraith was released, but I was pretty interested right away. Went down to the shop and played a couple games with the Orodex, and I was pretty into it straight away, really.
Yeah, and big shout out
Yeah.
to Amal as well. I mean, it's been a sort of long time presence in the TCG community, always supporting new games and new players and everything. I think one of my first IMA events was down at Vagabond, so thank you, Amal, for being a great presence over the years.
Hey, good times.
Absolutely. Just before we dive into the matchup overviews, just kind of like looking at the different, classes, I just wanted to give a shout out to Wesley Lingard, who joined us on some of our matchup overviews that we put on YouTube. He's a great Ranger player, and he showed us a thing or two about going wide on Ranger. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that was really cool of him because um, he commented on one of our videos saying he thought we'd maybe done Rager a bit of an injustice and offered to kind of show us his deck, and I think he definitely taught us a thing or two. I think there were some really great games. Certainly gave me a good run for my money, so I'd suggest checking out those ones on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I was really impressed with how he managed to keep it consistent. And those cards like Chains of Imminence, it just really showed the power of the deck. And I think if you're interested in learning Ranger, definitely check out those games. It would be on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and I know you must have been pretty happy to see Promise of Plenty, which is, I believe, one of your
Yeah.
favorites on the new set.
Yeah, I think that card just looks insane in Ranger. Like, imagine just getting a free reload on an arrow. Yeah.
It's like, what?
But anyway, back to our guest. Tom, tell us something about Warrior. What are your worst matchups? What are your favorite matchups? And how has this all changed with Crucible?
Yeah, and just to step in before we begin, one of the big reasons we wanted to get Tom on the show today is because he's been a long time Warrior main. He's a very good Warrior player. I really enjoy testing against him I remember when Warrior was sort of the dominant deck in the format, Tom was the most popular guy in our friend group because we all wanted to test against them. So,
Yeah, fair enough.
but
That's a good deck.
anyway, yeah. So go ahead, Tom. Sort of run us through. Should we maybe start off with something like Warrior vs Guardian, if you want to walk us
Yeah,
through your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. I mean, that's a classic one. I mean, if you look at, I guess, what Warrior looked like before Crucible, um, I guess it really struggled to get go again consistently enough to, put enough pressure just with the weapon. So, we relied on go wide attacks. Cards like Life for Life, Scar for a Scar, Ravenous Rebel even. These were cards that gave Warrior a chance against the defensive, I guess, fatiguing decks like Bravo, like Dash. So, when we move to Crucible now, there are more options to focus in on the weapon, which is making decision making a little bit hard for making decks, to be honest. But I mean, in Arcane, I think the Warrior matchup was pretty good against Bravo personally. I think like any matchup, there is a large degree of the more skillful player will win, and a lot of matchups are very close. But I felt that Warrior could go wide enough and put enough pressure on to keep Guardian on the back foot, and ultimately cards like Iron Song, Determination are going to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the changes that you've seen in that matchup from Crucible of War? Are there are there some key cards in Guardian that's sort of narrowed the gap there or made it a bit tougher?
Yeah, definitely. I think the matchup's closer now. I think the problem that maybe Bravo had was it didn't put enough pressure or enough threat. I mean, yeah, we've got these big crush effects crippling, but you can stop these crush effects, especially with Warrior with their equipment, fantastic at blocking.
Mm-hmm.
But now the main card, I guess, that lets aggro put more pressure on, be a bit more threatening is Towering Titan.
Towering Titan.
Specifically the blue one. I think
Mm-hmm.
Guardian still runs a lot of blue cards, and it is a tough card to set up. Obviously, it costs 9 mana. But if the Bravo player can get a Towering Titan down, and then hit you for 19 damage, threatening a massive crush effect, and there are a lot of options for them now. Options like Mangle, Crippling Crush still classic, and Righteous Cleansing's up there as well. Probably not quite as important against Warrior maybe as cards like Mangle and Crippling, but yeah, also
Mm-hmm.
Spinal Crush. I mean, Spinal Crush is huge. Stop and go again. But
Mm-hmm.
it's almost impossible to stop a big attack like that with Towering Titan. Very, very hard. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that lets, I guess, Bravo put a bit more pressure on and threaten the warrior a little bit more. So it's very tough. I still think it's pretty 50-50 matchup, really. And always it's going to be skill dependent as well.
Yeah, because I
Mm-hmm.
know a few sort of both Guardian and Warrior players I've spoken to have really emphasised that point that it's a quite heavily skill dependent matchup. They say, often the better player or the person who plays the matchup better will win the game. But I just had a bit of a question, and maybe for our audience out there, because for me, someone who's not much of a Warrior player myself, Towering Titan, or Guardian player for that matter, Towering Titan, because you mentioned it's cost 9 resources to play, it's a huge setup, and then you also, do you find sometimes when they set up the Towering Titan, is it hard to, are you trying to put enough pressure on them to force them to block so they can't throw out a big attack, or are they just taking the damage on those turns?
Yeah, you can't give the Bravo player room to set up the Tearing Titan if they've got it. You know, if they can stop your attack with an unmovable from Arsenal, stop Reprise from being a factor, if you've just got one of those hands that, you're just putting it all into the one attack and hoping it gets over, if they can blank you with one unmovable, they might be able to give themselves a bit of space, especially if they have cards like Energy Potion available to really get them over, to play these cards. Um, yeah, Towering Titan's pretty tough. I had the first game against Bravo. I had 2 games against Kale, 1 game against Jacob. Or first couple of heats at the Road to Nationals at Card Merchant just
Mm-hmm.
last weekend. So I came up short against Jacob. He managed to get a big crippling off very early in the game. So, I mean, being able to start in that matchup is very important. I think you definitely want to be choosing to start, which isn't always the case for other matchups, but in that matchup, I think you want to start, you know, avoid getting crippling crush on turn 2 at least, because that really makes it hard to get the pressure back, the momentum back.
Damn.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, just having a look at a few other Guardian cards here, one that kind of leapt out to me is Blessing of Serenity. Is that a card that you found Guardians running against you? Because it's an instant, does that sort of give them more tools to turn off Reprise, or have you not really encountered that card much?
Yeah, look, I have. I did have that card played against me on the weekend. It was effective. I think it's good because you can hold it. You don't have to overblock. You're not turning on Reprise. You're getting around Dominate. Um, it's very flexible.
True.
I think in a lot of cases it's actually better than the other card that comes to mind, which is Reinforce the Line.
Yep.
Especially against Warrior, I think Reinforce the Line can get you in a bit of trouble. Rout absolutely blows that card out, and you're going
Yeah.
to get smashed. So Reinforce the Line, great card. Maybe not so much if you're expecting your opponent to have Rout, um,
Mm-hmm.
but of course that's a generic card, so any class can play that as opposed to a Blessing, I believe, is a Bravo card, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just wondering as well. Do you have any sort of particular tips on how to navigate that game as a Warrior player? Maybe for some of the audience out there who may be having a bit of trouble in Guardian versus Warrior. For example, do you try and save some of your big cards like Determination and Spoils of War, Supremacy? Are those ones you're pitching early and saving for later, or are you just trying to sort of burn through them and get them back with the remembrance to close out the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely comes down to, are you playing 60 cards? Are you playing close to 70? Do you expect that it's going to be a game of attrition where the Bravo player might be playing 2-3 Remembrance and they're just going to try block you out? I think playing defensively was really the only option pre-Crucible, whereas now Bravo can play more aggressively, so we might see Bravo decks not playing Remembrance, possibly just playing 60 cards, trying to just kill you. But look, with Determination, it's definitely a card that you want to use at the right time. So after your opponent is blocked up with their equipment, at least with a few pieces of equipment, because you want to make sure you get through with Determination when it's paired with cards like Spores of War, I believe, or Spores for War, Spores of War. So that card is great with Determination. Um, so if you can really get over when they've lost some equipment, when their defense reactions are a little bit lower, maybe when they've played an unmovable or two, maybe a Sinks in the graveyard or two as well, and they're running low, then that's when you want to try and set up a big turn with Determination and cards like Spoils of War, Steelblade Supremacy. And obviously you want to have some backup because you can expect they're still probably going to have at least one defense reaction. So cards like Route will really help you get over there when you need to, when their equipment's down and you really need to get through towards the end of the game.
Yeah, and I guess Ironsong Determination has that great factor of being a yellow card, which means if you get it quite early, it's okay just to pitch it out and just save it for later in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think pitching Determination early is a pretty good strategy against most decks, but certainly, especially against defensive decks like Bravo, where
Mm.
if you just play it willy-nilly, you're probably not getting through, especially if it's in the early game. So pitching it's usually the good option. Sometimes you'll run it out, um, but you certainly don't want to be running out all three in the first half of the game because you're probably not going to be able to get through late game.
And just
Yeah,
one.
sorry, I just wanted to know, do you run many remembrances in that matchup?
So it depends on the player, to be honest. So one of the classic Bravo rivals would be Kale McCreath, right? And Kale notoriously plays quite heavy remembrance. I think he might be adjusting that slightly, but yeah, look against Kale, for example, I would. The list I was playing on the weekend, I only have one remembrance in the list anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so it's either run it or don't, and I do run it against Bravo. Um, but I don't think there are going to be too many games where it goes to fatigue in this matchup. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely possible depending on how the players play, especially how the Bravo player wants to play. Um, but look, remembrance is never a bad thing unless you can't block and you're getting crushed, I guess. So you want to be careful. I don't think you want to run 3 remembrance. I think 1 to 2 is correct in that matchup.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to know is because I know you're a big fan of what we call the sidestep warrior, in honor of you, of running out attacks like spoils of war, driving blade that give you automatic go again, and then
Right.
sort of like bluffing a reaction, then throwing down another attack after it. Do you find cards like, for example, Command and Conquer or Coax the Commotion, are those worth playing for plays like that in the Guardian matchup, or not really?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Command and Conquer is a card that, um, you know, your opponent is quite often going to want to have a defense reaction in the arsenal, and it's going to be very effective against them. So if you can do something like run out a blue hidden run, swing off the weapon, maybe you have another action to play as well, like a Dauntless or something. If they do manage to block it up, like you've got the option. If they didn't play the defense reaction from Arsenal, you can run out that Command and Conquer and try to get them. I think Enlightened Strike is better in that spot because it's not as dependent on them having an Arsenal or not. Quite often they do want to block from Arsenal to not trigger a prize. So quite often if you try to
Mm-hmm.
set up a CNC with a go again, it can be a little bit telegraphed and they're going to try to block from their Arsenal on your weapon attack. Um, but yeah, I think Command and Conquer is definitely a card that you want more threats and options, and you want to confuse your opponent. If you become too predictable, if you're just running all weapon actions and you're just trying to get the weapon over it, you're going to be predictable. You can be beaten. But if you give your opponent different looks, if you run cards like Scars and Life's attack actions that can go a little bit wide before you attack with a weapon, that's usually free damage because they want to wait until you swing with Dawnblade. But also the sidestep style and playing, a commander and a line and strike after a Gauntlet Quicksilver, for example, they can be really effective if you get your opponent off guard. If they've still got the
Mm-hmm.
arsenal, if they're not expecting a glint, glint is the best way to get off Command and Conquer for sure, because it's completely untelegraphed, unless of course you find a way to telegraph glint, which is possible.
Yeah, no,
Mm.
fair enough. And I guess, so we do have a few matchups to cover, so were there any final thoughts you wanted to say on Guardian before we move on, or is that pretty much, we covered that one off?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played it a huge amount in this format. This is my initial impressions are that it's very, very close. You want to put pressure on Guardian, like always, just stop them from setting up a Tearing Titan, basically.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah. And I mean, other than Guardian, what are the matchups you're worried about the most?
So I'm still a little bit worried about Dash. Um, I had one game on the weekend against Dash. I wasn't really expecting the deck. It was a deck where I gained a lot of confidence in the matchup towards the end of Arcane. Not so
Mm-hmm.
much against the pure control, but against the mid-range decks. I felt it was about 50-50 for Warrior actually. But I was beaten by Henry Moore. Shout out to Henry on the
Shout
dash.
out.
He definitely showed me the power of Plasma Purifier, and especially when it's combined with High Octane. Um, ending up with 4 action points and 4 mana, swing 4 times for 3 with your pistol is definitely no joke. And yeah, Dash is still an absolute threat. So that's a matchup I really need to figure out going into nationals in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, because
Nice.
is that one of those matchups? Is it sort of similar to the old meta in a way that if you find yourself, say you take a boost hit and you take a couple of pistol hits, suddenly you've taken 7 to 8 damage to the turn, and then you try to set up your big attack back, and they blank it out with equipment and defense react. Does it start to sort of feel that you can quickly fall behind in that matchup?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Dash is putting consistent pressure on you, especially if they can get an early spark off and get a second chamber or the plasma. Um, you really do need to save your important cards. Determination is the big one. You really don't want to play Iron Song Determination early against Dash. I mean, you might be able to play one on off turn or where it just makes sense, but for the most part, you want to be pitching that. Similar with cards like Steelblade Supremacy. Yeah, it's difficult because with the Purifier, it comes in for 3. It becomes a little bit more attractive to actually start blocking it. And if they're just swinging twice for 3, it might actually be a good option to, take the first hit, block out the second, be a bit more patient. So we're still figuring that out, but yeah, that's the thing. If you take a huge amount of damage, or not a huge amount, but a consistent decent amount each turn to try to get these big turns off with 5 cards, because of course Warrior needs all their cards really to try to get over. But if they blank you and they keep doing damage every turn, you fall behind pretty quick. That's for sure.
Yes.
True.
So cards like so Iron Song Determination is the big key one in that matchup. You find did you find sort of that have you experimented with a bit of a go wide strategy as well, like some of those old cards like Scar and Life for Life, or have you trended away from that a little bit with your
Yeah,
build?
good. It's a good question because I think the matchup was so good for Warrior or winnable for Warrior because of those cards like Scar for a Scar and Life for a Life. I didn't opt to play those cards on the weekend. I felt like cards like Dauntless, I wanted to really try out and just try to focus in on the weapon a little bit more. I felt that with Hit and Run and Spoils, I can get Go Again enough. I was running a couple of Flock as well, Flock of the Featherwalkers, just to try to get that critical mass of Go Again enablers in the deck. But as Henry was able to blank my attacks and not let me get over it all, it did seem like I was missing those cards. So that's something I'm definitely going to look at. I think maybe not against other matchups, but maybe against Dash, it still is correct to be playing some of those go wide attacks with Go Again.
Yeah, because like you mentioned, the Purifier sort of throws in an extra wrinkle into that matchup that wasn't there before. Because I've seen some comments about how it makes sort of blocking a bit more worthwhile in a way, because if they Purify, then you feel like you're getting value because you're blocking out the full 3. But from my sort of small experience with that card, it really seems to shine when because quite often, if you've got a good hand, you don't want to use any of your cards to block. So if they Purifier, if they have a counter on Purifier and a blue card, and then they use that to swing at you for 6 damage with 2 pistol hits, that's a lot of damage. Like,
Yeah.
even if you have a big turn, you might not get 6 damage. Like, you might not get that life swing back on them.
Yeah. If you're not blocking and you're trying to get there, the Croc does speed up a little bit. They are doing more damage, and when they get 2 chambers in the Purifier, it really starts stacking up, and yeah, it's a race at that point. You need to be putting pressure on, taking the cards out of their hands so they can't load up the pistol in the chambers and just ping you at will turn after turn. I mean, it's all about
So I
putting
guess
the
I
pressure on
guess
the
you're
dashboard.
both playing quite an aggressive game. So would you take out your defense reacts against this matchup?
Absolutely. I would take out almost every single defense reaction against Dash. It would be the opposite for Dash against Warrior. They want to play almost all of their, if not every single defense reaction they have available. Dash wants to stop the Dawnblade and just ping away and chip away at your life total until you're dead, basically. Obviously,
Yeah.
they'll
So they
try
kind
to
of
finish
you're
off
trying to go as aggro as you can. They try to pull back, play a more conservative game, get those pistol heads through, chip away.
Yeah, but I mean, it didn't work out for me on this occasion, so it might be. I mean, depending on, of course, what items your opponents are playing, it all depends on that as well. Blocking up more and being more patient might be the way to go if they're only attacking twice a turn with pistol. But of course, it's never going to be that simple. They've got boost cards that they have at their disposal, and they have cards like Command and Conquer, which you need to respect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely needs a bit more testing as far as the strategy against Dash and specifically against the Purifier. Um, yeah, early days yet.
Yeah, because from what it sounds like, a key there is sort of identifying your window, like you mentioned with determination. You maybe wait for them to burn through a few defense reacts, block with a couple of equipment. Maybe they don't have a card in arsenal, and then you kind of really try and go for the throat in those turns.
Yeah, I think it's important if you have a mediocre hand, maybe you've got a blue, you've got a supremacy, but you don't have reaction, you don't have access to go again. You probably want to be pitching your supremacy, blocking up if you can, and just putting a little bit more pressure back as efficiently as you can, and just be patient.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Now, we probably won't go over Ninja too in depth because I believe that's still a fairly strong matchup for Warrior.
I was gonna say it could be worth talking about the ninja control though against
Mm.
Warrior.
Yeah,
Because it's Jason Long we've seen in the last Road to Nationals really dominate the Warrior heavy field with that deck.
Yeah, good point. I mean, obviously it's polar opposites and completely different matchups when you're talking about Warrior versus Ninja Control and Warrior versus, your traditional Ninja aggro.
Mm-hmm.
I think the matchup against the aggro Ninja deck has been pretty favorable for Warrior over time. Again, the better player will often win, but it's definitely favored to Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you beat me a few times in a row with Ninja. So it's definitely winnable, but yeah, it's definitely tough for Ninja. Ninja, I'm not sure if they really got a whole lot in this set, other than, of course, they get a battle worn equipment, which is great for them. They can block a little bit better. Um, but yeah, Warrior definitely seems to have got more powerful tools in Crucible than Ninja, so I would imagine that the aggro matchup is even more in favor of Warrior now.
Mm-hmm.
As for the control matchup, though, I mean, I haven't played it in Crucible. I remember Sasha's Ninja Turtle or his calling winning deck, Ninja Control. That one absolutely smashed me. I had no idea about that strategy, of course, going in, but I feel like I've got a lot more experience against Fatigueless and Dash in Arcane Season. Dash, I
Mm-hmm.
feel, has got a faster clock, puts more pressure on, gives you less space to set up. Whether against Ninja, I think you can be a bit more patient with Warrior and actually try to burn away the reactions with, um, pressure with attacks. Maybe cards like Dauntless are going to be more effective against them.
Mm.
You've got more time to set up late game than against Dash, I think. But look, I could be wrong there. I haven't tested against the deck in Crucible.
Fair enough. One of the matchups I was really curious to talk to you about is what I thought could be one of Warrior's Achilles' heels is Wizard. Um,
Yep.
I feel like Wizard is one of those decks that can really punish Warrior because I think Warrior doesn't put as much pressure on as an aggressive ninja against Wizard, so it kind of lets Wizard dictate the pace of the game. Have you had much experience against Wizard?
yeah, you experienced beating me on the weekend, but I'll let you take that one, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, aside from obviously the result on the weekend there, yeah, like I've played a little bit against Wizard before and after Crucible. It's definitely not a good matchup for Warrior. If you look at Warrior and Ninja, right? I mean, Warrior's got these equipment that block up two, and they've got no, you know, class equipment with Arcane Barrier, basically. They're not geared towards beating or defending against a wizard, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're a blonde girl in a metal suit, you're going to get burned. That's how it should go, really, if you think about it.
True.
Um, but yeah, look, it's the way I play the matchup is just to play no null rune and just go ham and race, and it really feels like an autopilot game for Warrior, where it's a lot of decision making for the wizard. It's probably pretty tough decisions, but it just comes down to, okay, well, I'm going to apply pressure and race you. I can't block any of your spells. Let's see if you can kill me before I kill you. So I feel very out of control in that game without null runes. To be honest, I was running 0 Noah and 0 Prayer, so I definitely think I need to give it a bit more respect. And I've been beaten by Wizard a couple times now, in fact, on the channel, uh, with the Warrior vs Wizard, one of the games on the channel there.
Spoiler alert. No,
Yeah.
jokes.
Yeah, no, I think there was an older one, but yeah. Anyway, I guess if you haven't watched that video, sorry for the spoiler.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, but I think just building on that, because I've played a little bit of Warrior vs Wizard. Tom actually beat me on the weekend on it, unfortunately for me. But I do think in general it's a very tough matchup for Warrior as built. Perhaps with, say, a few prayers in there that could swing the matchup a little bit. But it does feel as Wizard if you probably need to play sort of a little bit more disciplined than I did. I was just taking sort of huge chunks of damage every turn and thinking, oh, I'll just go for the race and the win. And
I mean, you had the option to, Kano, and you would have won. You had lethal if you took a different line, so it was definitely a winnable game.
yeah, because I just think it can be tough for Warrior because as Wizard you're able to pick your spots sort of reasonably well. And if you do get hit by a big turn, often it's not the end of the world. You just, as long as you're keeping up in damage, once you get them down to that magic number of about sort of 10 to 15, it does become very difficult for them because at that stage in the game, you just need to get off 1 or 2 spells, and then Storm Triders is going to win you the game, or Kano is probably going to win you the game. And yeah, like Warrior, they basically can't block anything you do, and you can block what they do. So
Yeah, I mean, maybe if Warrior runs triple Noah, and it would probably be a completely different style of game.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that. Like, is it worth putting in 3 null runes for that particular matchup? Or do you think the way to go is to go for prayers? Because Warriors strikes me as a class that really requires all the resources it can get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what's your take on null runes versus prayers?
I think probably prayers are the way to go. Like you say, if you're playing 3 Norin, you might not have access to some of your best equipment and the effects that they come with. So things like, the Tunic Mana, things like the Brave Forge Braces pump. You're going to miss those. I think if you do play triple Norin, you keep the Bolters. That's the best one.
Okay.
But if you're pitching, like you say, your 1 blue or your resources to try and prevent this damage, you're not going to be having a turn really at all. Prayers are a little bit more. They fit into the turn a little bit better. If you have the Tunic and you pop the Tunic and, keep a prayer on Arsenal, then you can just keep the game plan of just smashing and trying to get them to 0 life from 30, which is, less obviously than they have to deal to you. Cards like Scar for a Scar and Life for a Life are obviously a lot worse in that matchup, so that you got to consider, like, for example, you might want the Scars and the Lives against Dash, but then, that's 6 cards that are pretty much dead cards against Kano, so it's always a balancing act, isn't it?
yeah, because
True.
I feel like for Wizard against decks like Warrior and Ninja, it's apart from Ninja Control, obviously talking about aggro, it's much more difficult for them to support that triple Norin. Ninja often skews very red heavy. Warrior not so much, but still they're not quite like those Dash and Guardian decks that run sort of 30 plus blues. So I find against those decks, if you're playing against sort of a very experienced Wizard player, which unfortunately I'm not quite there, but I think a really top Wizard player is able to sort of control the tempo of that game to the point where they're just sort of trading out damage, chipping through damage back until they're confident that they can burn you out. So I think as it stands, it's very difficult for those classes. Maybe prayers is the way to go, but yeah, well.
I mean, I will say I think Warrior probably wants to play more blue than it did in the last season because, if you've got cards like Dauntless which cost a mana, or you're playing more actions that cost mana and less Scar for a Scar or 0 cost things, you probably want a bit more blue. I think decks like Runeblade and Wizard are going to get a bit more popular. Even for Runeblade, like having a higher amount of blue is going to help you, and that's pretty grindy matchup. That's another close matchup, Runeblade Warrior, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we talk a bit more about Runeblade? Because we gave Warrior, I think, a really decent overview. But it's a class that has really picked up in popularity. A lot of people are requesting gameplay overviews for Runeblade. Because, Tom, you have some experience with Runeblade as well.
What's your take on the matchups for Runeblade in terms of, good matchups and bad matchups, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I've put in quite enough work or reps with Runeblade to really have a properly educated idea of what the matchups look like. But yeah, look, I have played a few games before and after Crucible. I really, really enjoy playing Runeblade. I think it probably got the biggest boost out of any class in this set. Um, yeah, some fantastic cards, some really good aggro cards that I think I was struggling before with going for a more of a slogism, play the Spellblade Assaults, the bigger attacks, and try to line up
Mm-hmm.
slogisms, which also lend themselves to cards like Arknight Ascendancy. But, you get cards like, Morvrian Skies, great. It gives you the ability to go wider and play cheaper attacks. To try to go wide and really play a better
Would you
aggro
say that's your
strategy.
favorite card from Crucible for Runeblade?
I mean, it probably lends itself best to one of my favorite cards, if not my favorite card from Arcane, which is Drawn to the Dark Dimensions. Great,
Yep.
Yeah.
definitely a great card, underrated Runeblade card. The fact that it draws a card is great. Obviously, it doesn't have Go again, so this sort of remedies that, so you can actually use that card possibly
Hey,
after
it's
you
like a
play
it's
the
like a
DDD.
snatch in Runeblade class.
Yeah,
Great
which
card.
doesn't have to hit.
Yeah, it costs 0 most of the time. Gets in for a bit of damage, draws you a card. It's going to do things like, you know, pop rune chance, possibly when it attacks, that don't seem like they're that threatening. And then, if you're drawing a card and going again with a, Morvrian Skies into DDD, you're then going to be playing another attack that might actually matter if you've taken arcane damage previously, like a Dread Triptych, which is a great, great card. That is the card that I think just plays absolutely fantastically in my experience in the new set. That card is absolutely nuts with Mordred Tide. It's a lot of fun, and you can just do some absolutely ridiculous turns with Runeblade and some of the new tools in this set.
Yeah, because if speaking of Runeblade matchups, because that's a deck I've sort of worked on a fair bit. Here's a pro tip for our audience: Runeblade OTK. I don't think it's quite there yet, but I had a bit of a negative experience on that. But speaking of Runeblade, looking at it against decks like say Warrior, Ninja, and Dash, if we just look at those three quickly, against Warrior, I feel that you're able to keep up with him quite well. Because of
Right.
cards like Reduce to Rune Chant, Enchanting Melody. So I like to run sort of the 6 Reduce to Rune Chant, the red and the yellows, and the Enchanting Melodies, and maybe a couple of Sync Belows.
Definitely.
And against those ones, like, just being able to... And also, if we look at the defensive options, the equipment on Runeblade, you've got Grasp of the Arknight, Battle Worn, 2 block, you've got Arknight Skullcap, Bloodsheath Skeletor from Crucible of War, and you can even run Iron Rot Legs. If you get maximum blocking value out of all of those, you effectively start the game with an extra 10 life. So
That's insane.
yeah, which is like massive, which is absolutely huge. I feel against decks like Warrior and Ninja, you're able to get solid chip value from sort of single rune chants, or actually against those decks you can go through with multiple rune chants as well, because if they're pitching their resource cards, it sets them back a long way in their turn. So I feel like some of the more aggressive Runeblade decks these days can sort of really turn the screws on those decks by, you're playing throughout the game and you're just taking a few rune chants here and there, and then suddenly you're on 25 life and everything's feeling just a little bit harder, and you're really feeling the pressure to keep up with them.
Yeah, and
mean,
I really want to stress the importance of Enchanting Melody in that matchup. That card is, it's great versus Warrior in a lot of decks, but Runeblade just makes it work so much better. If you go something like Enchanting Melody into Read the Runes or something, it really sets up massive turns.
Yeah, and it's great because even Enchanting Melody into a Spellblade Strike, or Enchanting Melody into a Nebula Blade swing, which the melody, it triggers your Nebula Blade. It gives it that +3 attack. So there's a lot of good options in Runeblade now, and cards like Tom mentioned, like Maverick and Skies. So I feel it's against decks like Warrior and Ninja in particular. I feel a lot of it's about controlling the tempo, and I think with sort of really good equipment, some of the best defense reactions in the game, I feel, it really gives you the option to do that, and then you can either sort of set up for a bigger turn or start throwing out multiple little turns against them. So the ones for Runeblade, though, I feel the decks that really require you to sort of put the reps in and test against, similar to kind of Wizard in a way, it's decks like Guardian and Dash that can consistently shut down your rune chants. So that's something that I found
Like a high blue pitch classes.
yeah, because against those classes, it's sometimes you don't want to have 3 rune chants basically when you're swinging in for an attack. I mean, I know I played a game recently. I believe it was against actually it was either with Dash or Brute or something like that. But I found it really difficult to get value because it just so happened on a lot of my turns I generated 3 rune chants and I'd throw out like a rune flash, and then they sort of pitch a blue, prevent all your rune chants, and that's kind of wasted a lot of resources that you've put into generating those. Whereas things like 1 rune chant or 2 rune chants are great because a lot of players, you're not wanting to pitch 1 card to deal with 1 rune chant. And if you don't do that, that allows you then to get value from cards such as Consuming Volition, cards like Meet and Greets, Dread Triptych, Rattlebones. There's a number of cards now that really you get sort of paid off for getting that rune chant damage through. And on top of that as well, like, you know, it's frustrating for people if you attack with a single rune chant, they pitch a blue, say a red card, and then you generate more rune chants and come in again, and then they're thinking, well, I've kind of, now do I have to
I could have pitched a blue.
I could have pitched a blue. So my advice for Runeblade players out there is just, if you're keen to play Runeblade at a tournament, just really consider how you're playing against decks with different pitch counts, because what works against Warrior and Ninja isn't necessarily going to work against higher blue pitch count decks or defensive decks like Brute that are able to play the long game and sort of consistently prevent your rune chants, which really sort of takes the punch out of your deck. So just something to bear in mind, I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it all comes down to what you think the metagame's going to look like, right? I mean, different decks are going to be... every deck's going to have bad matchups, good matchups, so you just want to see what you expect to come up against, and if you've got the option of being able to play multiple decks, then yeah, Runeblade could definitely take out a tournament if it's in the right place.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of, I mentioned Brute earlier, and that's a deck I really wanted to ask you about, Carol, because to me, looking at the metagame at the moment, I feel like Brute has a number of very strong matchups. What's sort of your feel on that? Because I know in the previous meta, it felt quite strong against sort of both Warrior and Ninja, which are 2 of the key decks, but it struggled with Dash a little bit. I know Brute is one of the absolute boogeyman decks for Wizard. It's nearly impossible to beat. But what's your kind of feeling on that?
I feel like cards like Skullhorn, I think it is, and Arg Smash have really geared the deck to beat Wizard and Dash, just because of those 2. I think Skullhorn just makes Wizard matchup, a piece of cake. Basically, I mean, you already had the Intimidates previously that are just so hard for Wizard to set up any combos on your turn, because as soon as you Intimidate, they're put in a really tough spot of, do I try and go off, or do I hold my cards back so I can block, especially with something like Barraging Beatdown. And now, the Helm gives me Arcane Barrier 2, which is great. And against Dash, I mean, Dash Control, I feel like, has a tough time now in the metagame just because of Arc Smash. The deck is very slow. It's all about setting up, and Arc Smash just whacks your, you can kill like 3 chambers with 1 card, which is insane. I feel like the mid-range Dash is still a good deck to beat Brute. I don't think it's, Arc Smash is not a one-stop shop to just completely stop Dash. Those more aggressive decks are definitely punish you for trying to destroy their chambers or their items. But I think it does help the matchup.
Yeah, because I feel that was, that's always been a bit of an issue for Brute, because, if I look at the metagame in the moment, I've always found it quite difficult to beat Brute on decks like Runeblade, on Wizards, Warrior and Ninja I feel are quite tough. So it really kind of feels that if you can solve that dash mid-range matchup, the deck seems to be in a really solid place. Do you,
Yeah, in saying that, I feel like because Warrior got so many new toys and Ninja got a lot of good cards as well. I found Salt the Wound has been really painful for Brute. I've not only that, but there are just some cards that put a bit more pressure than they used to. So I think Ninja is a little bit harder, even though I still think it's Brute favored, because Barraging Beatdown is so effective at getting cards out of their hand. But Warrior is a lot harder. I mean, yeah, the game play, the matchup overview that I did with Tom actually just proved that. I felt like before Brute could just kind of sit there, defend, and kind of chip away with romping clubs and single barraging beatdowns, whereas now it's a lot harder to stop Warrior going over.
do you feel they just have a few more cards that can put pressure on you now? Things like Spoils of War, things like Dauntless, they make it a little bit harder to play a defensive game?
Yeah, I feel like they have a lot less off turns that you could capitalize on. In saying that, I think it's still around 50-50, and as Tom said about a lot of these matchups, I think this one is quite skill dependent.
Mm.
But I feel the hardest matchup for Brute at the moment is Guardian.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah, I feel like Guardian is the Achilles heel of Brute. Their playstyle is quite similar. They both have these kind of set up turns with massive, like when you kind of go off, they can block quite well. So it just seems whoever can, in terms of Guardian, who can get more pummels on their threats, who can block up the most damage, is going to win. But I think it is a bit 60% towards Guardian and 40% towards Brute. Just because their hammer hits for 6, your club hits for 4. So Brute just has to do a little bit more work to get the damage through.
Is it one of those matchups that you find, if you're trying to play the long game against them, is like you mentioned, the difference in damage of your weapons, does that really come through? Like, are you feeling like you have to put pressure on them with your hand, whereas they can play a bit more defensively and just keep hitting you?
Yeah, I feel like you're forced to go a bit more aggressively, which is not necessarily what Brute likes to do. Personally, I like to sit on a game and just really kind of drag it out, find really good spots to do big combos. But at the same time, if you decide to do the same thing, if you go too slow, they start getting these massive dominate attacks, and they can just go aggro on you. So I just feel like it's really hard to find the balance. I think that as a Brute, you have to go very aggressively and constantly put on pressure, constantly strip cards out of the hand. I don't know. I think for me, I might start playing around with cards like Scar for a Scar and maybe Life for a Life just to kind of put extra pressure on. But yeah, I still have to figure out that matchup.
Yeah, because Guardian, it's actually really interesting seeing it being sort of a bit of a Bravo renaissance with Crucible of War, when they've got those new tools like Mangle and Righteous Cleansing, and, they can sort of tailor the deck for certain matchups to make it very good. Because I know even in Arcane Rising, Ninja, which, traditionally had been a little bit more difficult for Guardian, they'd got their matchup down pretty well, and it seems to be the same in the new meta. And they seem to have improved their matchup against Warrior. They've got pretty good matchup against Brute. So that really seems to be a deck that you need to be prepared for if you're going into a big tournament.
Yeah, as I think it is the deck to beat at the moment, actually. Many people might disagree because of, kind of the memories of Arcane Rising where Bravo was this underpowered deck, I'd say. But it's getting a lot of momentum. It's got a lot more threats. It's got those blue pitch cards that actually do quite a lot. and it's got an extra pieces of armor, which is great against decks like Ninja and Ranger and those kind of small chip away decks.
Yeah, and even decks like Wizard, where I think if you put a lot of time into that matchup, I think you can get it reasonably even or good as a Wizard, but I know I found it very tough playing at sort of those triple Nova and Guardian decks where, you know, they run energy potions and things as well. They're able just to sort of consistently pitch 2 cards, hit you for 6 with a hammer, have 2 resources up and a card in hand, and sort of really shut down your windows whilst also being able to put big pressure on you on multiple turns of things like Spinal Crush, Crippling Crush, Righteous Cleansing. There's just so many options, so many things that you have to fight through to get there. So,
and it's interesting seeing. I just want to say that Energy Potion is an interesting addition to Guardian because it's so versatile. You know, against things like Wizard, it can be a very defensive card. It lets you predict your life total in times when you just completely use up your whole hand. And against things like Warrior or Mirror, it can really make a difference in terms of pushing through damage. Whether it's sacrificing it for a pummel from Arsenal that, you know, opponent didn't see coming. It's very versatile.
It's just
Always
really
threatens
versatile,
pummel.
yeah, and I think that's one of the big things, having just having a constant pummel threat at all times. It like really makes it difficult to play around.
Yeah, I still think that Dash is quite a difficult matchup for Guardian, and it's one of those classes that, you know, it can do really well against everything, but Dash I think would still be favored for in that matchup.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they do have Towering Titan that they can set up. That's the thing. Dash, I guess if they have Octane turns, it will put pressure on. But if, you know, normally Dash puts less pressure on decks like Bravo than, you know, a Warrior or a Ninja might put on. So maybe the Bravo player gets more time to set up their big cripplings or their big crushes. And I don't know. I think the matchup will be better for Bravo. I'm not sure if it's favored, but it's definitely not going to be as bad as it was before.
Nah, true.
Yeah, because
To be honest, I don't really see Dash Control getting a lot of play in these competitive tournaments. Just as I mentioned, you know, Brute has Arc Smash, Warrior has a lot new tricks, Guardian has Towering Titan, which is insane versus like very control decks.
and even
So
and even cards like Emerging Dominance as well, which sort
True.
of give you another option for a sit-up turn. Stamp Authority, all things like that. They can give you those 5-card hands to really put the pressure on.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the Malaysian Road to Nationals though, and Dash Control 1, and what was the most represented deck? I believe it was Brute.
Okay, that is interesting.
Brute or Bravo?
I think it was Brute.
Yeah, I
Oh, was
suppose-
it?
I mean,
I could be wrong.
One small would have, without wanting to take away from that event at all, is I believe it was sort of relatively smaller than some of the Road to Nationals we've seen.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, you know, isn't to say it's, you know, winning any tournament, no matter the numbers, is difficult. You've got to win a lot of rounds in a row and then perform in the top 4 or top 8. But I think sometimes, yeah, you sort of need to have a look at the context of some of these things before we can draw sort of too many conclusions. But yeah, Guardian, really strong. And just one deck that we haven't sort of looked at too extensively, but I just wanted to circle back to, is the sort of aggro ninja lists out there at the moment, because to me it seems like it's a class that didn't actually get a whole lot out of Arcane Rising. I don't know if that's because we haven't seen new builds, but to me it seems quite difficult to incorporate those ones like Torrent of Tempo and Soulbead Strike, the ones that you have to hit to go again. They just feel a little bit clunky at times. So
I feel like they're clunky if you keep on trying to force a very aggressive ninja play. Personally, I'm a person who's always found Kodachis to be an extremely effective way to get through damage. I think, if anything, we might see a lot of these kind of more mid-rangey ninjas because of all the blocks for 3, which could help in the warrior matchup.
it might not put as much pressure. I think traditionally we see Ninja players just try and go ham, just try and dish out as much damage, get those Mask of Momentum triggers and stuff. But I'm thinking that we might see something between the list of Jason Long, the very ninja control list, and those aggro lists, something in between that kind of, you threaten the mask, but at the same time, you're cool. You just chill back, defend a little bit, chip away at Kodachis.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of Ninja players actually. First of all, Jared Fung, I believe it was. I apologize if I got the name wrong, but I played him on the weekend, and I felt his build was kind of like what you mentioned there. When I was playing against him on Wizard, he was good at sort of putting pressure on with some of the aggressive surging strike lines, but also having that option to just go, Kodachi, Soul Bead Strike, and, threading the Razor Reflex or the Ancestral, so sort of,
Yeah.
really forcing you to think about how you're blocking it. And the other one of course, Nick Anderson, who I believe made 3 finals in a row of some of those tournaments with one of the more sort of standard aggressive ninja lists, who really showcased, who actually also runs Fab Empire, one of the single sites out there. And I know he really showcased the strength of Salt the Wound, which is a card I hadn't looked at too
Yeah,
closely.
that's what I was gonna say. Nick did a great job. As a Brood player, I'm really confident in the Ninja matchup, and he got me sweating because I've managed to get a triple intimidate on turn 1 and deal 9 damage on turn 1, and he still almost brought it back. So props to him to really kind of being able to go on the aggressive non-stop, try and get as much damage in, and almost bring that game back.
Yeah, because Salt the Wound, it's kind of, I feel it's taken the spot of maybe something like Flusterfist in some of the old ninja lists, because it has a similar effect to Flusterfist, but you don't need the combo to get it through. So, just when you're doing things like you start your turn with a couple of Kodachis that get through, they might block out the first combo piece, your second combo piece gets in for 1 damage, and suddenly they play a 0-cost card that's dealing 5 damage from nowhere. And it just, it adds in like an extra little twist to Ninja that I think adds a bit of a punch to turns where you don't get your combos through, which seem like a bit of an off turn. So, I'm glad to see people sort of incorporating some of those new cards in.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of summarize everything, what are your guys? I'll start with you, Tom. What's your prediction for the most represented deck at Nationals and the one to win Nationals?
I think we'll see Warrior being, well, both actually. I think we'll see Warrior be the most represented. I think we'll see Warrior take it out.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
Tom Penny, champion of New Zealand, eh?
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I think there will be. I think there'll be a Warrior player in the finals at the very least. I think.
Oh,
Okay.
bold call.
And
What about you, Kieran?
I feel like Warrior and Dash are still going to be 2 of the more sort of represented decks. I think, Dash, the old school Dash mid-range deck, can still play basically the same, but it's got a little bit stronger because it's got cards like Overblast, cards like High Speed Impact, just those, Meganetic Shockwave, which is just an extra good blue card you can throw in. It's a deck that, it's just made a slight improvement on what it used to be, and the old version of it was very, very good. And similar thing with Warrior, it's just got a few extra tools to make the deck even better. As to what I think is going to win the tournament, I reckon we might see something like a Runeblade or a Wizard deck out there to take it out.
Ooh, big calls.
Because the thing about Wizard is...
Why are you going to play Wizard?
I don't think I'm good enough to play Wizard, sadly. But I think the thing about Wizard is that not a lot of people have a whole lot of experience playing against it. When you're preparing for Nationals and slots are very tight and you're 80, it's very tempting when you're trying to cut cards from a list or include cards to not put things like prayers in, to maybe sort of, think you don't need that additional null rune. So I think if someone out there's got like a really top Wizard list and they've played it a lot, it's going to be very, very difficult to deal with, and it'll have the added edge of people sort of not being ready for it. The only thing against it is it's very tough to play Wizard over 10 rounds of Swiss. But yeah, we'll see. But I do think Runeblade.
Yeah.
But I feel like
Whoa.
I know I struggle to play it over 4 rounds, let alone 10. But
Wizard is hard mode for sure over 10 rounds,
yeah,
I think.
but I think Runeblade is really, I think, the deck that's going to catch some people off guard. I don't know for sure, but I feel like there's a number of good players out there sort of working on Runeblade lists. We haven't seen a whole lot of it out. We've seen sort of bits and pieces. We've seen a few Runeblade decks here and there, but I think there's going to be some very finely tuned Runeblade decks, because I think with Runeblade, it's a deck that often when you build it, it feels pretty good, but it feels a little bit clunky. If someone's kind of unlocked the secret sauce, you know,
To glue it all together.
the 12 herbs and spices, you know, if someone cracks the Runeblade list, I think they're going to do very, very well, because again, it's a deck that people wouldn't have a whole lot of experience playing against. It didn't feature much in Arcane Rising. There's, you know, you might only see 1 or 2 people in your local metagames playing Runeblade. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I feel like we might see a Runeblade deck take out Nationals.
Nice.
I hope so.
And
Yeah,
you?
my prediction would be, I think, yeah, you're both right in saying that Dash and Warrior are going to be very heavily represented. I think I'm going to agree with Tom there. I think New Zealand, just in particular, has so many Warrior players that are just so confident in that class that they're going to rock it for Nationals. But yeah, I really hope that just because of that, there's a Wizard player out there to just take it all those Warriors out.
'Cause that's the thing. I feel like the only thing holding back Wizard is it's sort of almost unwinnable Brute matchup. But the thing is, there aren't a whole lot of Brute players out there, you know? Like, I know you're one of, I feel like, the better Brute players around. Unfortunately, you might not be able to make it. So,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. In the absence of Brute, you know, if you're a Wizard player and you're looking at it and thinking, what if there's sort of out of 100 people, there's, you know, 5 or 6 Brute players, maybe I'll just take that chance. You know, maybe the Brute players...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like still for Wizard, things like actually being able to, you know, just 100% win every Warrior matchup, when they include stuff like prayers or beating every ninja, is still hard just because of the fact that you're playing 10 rounds, I'd say. So, to be honest, like, it would make my year if Wizard won Nationals. But I'm going to say that Guardian, my first love in Flesh and Blood, you know, Guardian is going to be the deck that wins.
Yeah, and I think that's a solid call, because like we talked about consistency, Guardian is a deck, if you know it really well, you can sort of almost go on autopilot throughout Swiss. Like, you know your lines, you know your matchups well, you know exactly what you need to be doing at all times, and you can just consistently make the right play every single turn. So yeah, I mean, I could see Guardian doing it, but
I would love Wizard to win. I would love Runeblade to win, or Ranger, or Brute. I hope there's a Brute player out there who's just figured out the metagame, but my prediction would be that Guardian wins.
nah, it's gonna be my guy Viserai all day. All right.
Well, I hope you rock it.
Yeah. Well.
I think Guardian's probably a pretty good guess there.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, looks like we've gone over the 1 hour mark. Jeez, we've gone a little bit crazy today. But no, I think we've had a really good discussion about some of the matchups. Thank you, big shout out to Tom. Thank you for joining us and giving us some insights into Warrior, because I think Carol or I are the most accomplished Warrior players. So it's,
I'm a great Warrior player. What are you on about?
yeah, let's run 3 crazy brews and wait till turn 45.
It works.
But yeah, and like we say, we'll be trying to get up a few more gameplay videos out there for...
Especially with Runeblade, yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of requests, and yeah, we'd love to hear any thoughts or comments you have, or any requested gameplays. But aside from that, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck for all your future tournaments, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Session